Hello again. In this video, we're looking at clause 9.2, internal audit of ISO 27001. I guess we want to separate it out at this stage because auditing for information security management systems is a very different prospect to auditing for ISO 9001 quality management. I suppose there is a consideration for, while auditing to meet 9001 objectives, you can't ignore the opportunity to audit for 27001 objectives within your processes. So we would always keep that in mind. Having said that, the primary objective is to make sure that the information security controls that are documented are suitable and effective and are continually meeting the organization's requirements. Let's look at the criteria in two parts. The first half is as follows. The organisation shall conduct internal audits at planned intervals to provide information on whether the information security management system A conforms to 1. The organisation's own requirements for its information security management system, and 2. The requirements of this international standard. B is effectively implemented and maintained. Okay, so B is a given, and requirements of the organization and the standard are within the autonomy of the organization for it to decide. So I guess the primary objective then is to look at the shall bit of the criteria. The organization shall conduct internal audits at planned intervals. So look, internal audit programs, which is what we're going to look at in the second half, provide for that consideration for how frequently those planned intervals should be. So for the second part of the criteria, let's have a look now. The organisation shall C, plan, establish, implement and maintain an audit programme, including the frequency, methods, responsibilities, planning requirements and reporting. Second part of that is the audit programme shall take into consideration the importance of the processes concerned and the results of previous audits. So now we're looking at the word programme being a requirement, and that with planned intervals from the first half of the criteria kind of amounts to what we promote at Enable ISO with our internal audit programme methodology. So we would use an internal audit program schedule, and we would plan what happens each month with regard to auditing across the Annex SL management clauses, the Statement of Applicability itself, inspections, including, for environmental and occupational health and safety where appropriate, but including those information security controls that would be in need of regular validation. So what we've got to consider here really is the requirement for the second part of C, which is the audit program shall take into consideration the importance of the processes concerned and the results of previous audits. So, really this is, I suppose the expression that we would use with our clients would be, to the extent necessary, dependent on the criticality and the complexity of the processes and the nature of the work. So, I think every organization has to deem what's appropriate for its own requirements. I think we can look at the remainder of the clause now, which is as follows. The organization shall, D, define the audit criteria and scope for each audit. E, select auditors and conduct audits that ensure objectivity and the impartiality of the audit process. F, ensure that the results of the audits are reported to relevant management. And G, retain documented information as evidence of the audit programs and the audit results. I'd like at this point just to refer back to the preceding videos where we've discussed how processes are documented on the process risk register, and of course how the statement of applicability is analysed to determine the frequency of evaluation of those controls. And in particular, we looked at a preceding video, we looked at the monthly evaluation methodology for testing SOA controls. So that particular inspection would be something that's carried out by an auditor, where they go and observe what the tech team are doing, for example, in relation to testing the failovers for connectivity, power, data backup systems, failovers for processing requirements where that's appropriate. So I think with regard to the requirements of the expectations of an auditor, I suppose, coming in and looking at this criteria, I suppose, first of all, they want you to identify what processes need to be audited. That was determined within the scope under 4.4. I think also the actual process requirements themselves under clause 8.1. And then here we're looking at, well, the frequency of audit dependent on the criticality. And that would be determined through the process risk register and the statement of applicability, where we would decide that, well, this particular aspect is of a high priority to us. So we want a closer or more frequent inspection rate to report on the suitability and effectiveness. An auditor's expectation will be that it makes sense, like the frequency of your inspections will make sense for the type of operation you are with the type of processes that you employ. So the example I will give you is that if you're testing your restore from backup function on a monthly basis, and an auditor discovers at audit that you're heavily reliant on that function because it's something that happens maybe 5 or 6 times per day. We might be managing a large volume of client databases, for example. Well, in those instances, I think the frequency of that test might be expected to be increased. Having said that, if data backup is something that you've never had to do in real time, you've only ever tested it, and the result of that test is always the same, well, I think an auditor would accept that you could reduce the frequency in that instance, maybe to quarterly. I don't think the annually would be acceptable in any circumstance. Having said that, you also have to think of things like controls for acceptable use of assets and activity logs. Well, in a fast-paced environment where you've got a large number of users accessing information systems, it would be important that your internal audit team considers those controls that govern that whole area of access control, return of use, reported defects, and so on, just to make sure that the systems remain secure at all times. With regard to reporting, the scope is important. Each time you audit a particular system or process or code of practice, the expectation is that each audit will have its own individual scope, which will be a snapshot in time with regard to what you document there. So, for example, if you have had a recent reported issue, concern, data breach, customer data issue reported, well, it might be worthwhile bringing that into consideration during the audit and testing the controls over those particular areas with a direct focus. Another area that might be required for mention at the scoping part of an audit would be if there have been previous non-conformities documented. Well, you would want to make sure that those non-conformities don't arise again, and that any preventive action that might have been decided upon to correct that prior occurrence, that particular preventive action has been effective. And I guess, we can all extrapolate from there, and I would encourage you to do so and to consider A, what has to be audited? B, what matters to us on a security perspective, where you're looking at those controls you've put in place to manage the critical aspects of your business. The expectation is that the stuff that could potentially fail, that matters to you, that could interrupt you in your stride, should it fail, well, you should be testing that area more frequently. Okay, I think that's enough for now. Please get in touch if you need any help or guidance. You can contact us through the website, by email, or indeed through the chat box on the bottom right-hand corner of the website. Take care. Bye-bye.